Danny Blanchflower is here with us. He's a Dartmouth professor, a Bloomberg contributor, and also served on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. Inappropriate is what you would tell Mr. Trichet?
Yes, I heard the interview with George Soros and listened to him talk over the weekend, and I'm one of those who actually agree with his view about these interest rate rises. I mean, in some sense, the difficulty is to just think, what are you going to do with these inflation rate rises? Are you going to raise rates and push economies back into recession that have just struggled out? And many of these moves, it looks like, are pretty temporary. So the worry is, if you raise rates now, things are going to be serious. And there's a great column today by Wolfgang Munchauer in the FT, talks about what happens to Spain when you start to do that. He basically shows you that there was a big rise in house prices, and they've only fallen just a little bit. So if suddenly you start to raise interest rates, house prices there crumble, and now the banks are really in trouble. So this in some sense, the worry of the interest rate rises. What does this do to house prices? What does this do to the banks? What does it do to all these stress tests? So I think it's just time to sit there and wait, in some sense, and just bite the bullet, because recession's just too bad.
Well, you were at Bretton Woods, and the other term besides inappropriate that was thrown around was oxymoronic, right? And that had to do with the Bank of England.
Yes.
Larry Summers not liking what he's seeing in the UK.
Well, yes, I went to there was a press conference that Larry gave, and then he gave some after-dinner comments. And he was asked what his views were on austerity, on contractionary fiscal expansions. And he said it was a sort of an oxymoronic, a contradiction in terms, which is a sense that I've had. And he did say, well, OK, in 2 years' time, come back and I'll have a look and see if I was right. But it's too dangerous. The worry, in some sense, is if you think of that comment, it's an oxymoron. What you were just talking about in the US is essentially going to do the same thing. You're going to suddenly pull fiscally out of the economy at a time when the economy's just started to grow. So you might think this is a comment by Larry both on what's happening in the US if you suddenly cut too much. But I think austerity in the UK is a problem, and the IMF is expected today to lower its forecast for growth for the UK, which would be pretty embarrassing for the UK Chancellor.
Well, go back to what you were just saying about the United States, because when you're saying we're endangering ourselves, are you talking about the Fed stepping back in June, or are you talking about the debates about deficits and spending in this country?
Well, the sense of deficits and spending, I mean, the question really is, how big was that shock? What's got us out of it? In many senses, it was stimulus, and it was the Fed keeping rates low and rescuing the banks. The question is this all over? And I know that Bernanke, the great scholar of the Great Depression, has in the back of his mind 1937. You keep rates relatively low. You have to look through the inflation worry. And then what happens if you cut too much fiscally? That's what happened in 1937. You have to be mindful of the state of the economy. And if you go to sort of doctrinaire things and making up numbers, those numbers are actually sort of political numbers. The question is, can the economy deal with it, and is it going to destroy jobs? And job generation is a big problem. So, you know, if you go ahead and don't look at the growth numbers, you could really be back in recession.
Yeah, well, the debate here is about to move back to whether the U.S. can withstand higher taxes or not. That seems to be the indication.
Well, that's right. But obviously, I think the big debate really that people haven't focused on is, yes, you can deal with the deficit, but how quickly are you going to do it? Bernanke's talked about you should really deal with this thing over quite a long time period. If you try and do it too quickly, that's the problem. So I think the talk about the numbers is one thing, but how quickly are you going to do it is probably going to be crucial.
All right, David Blanchflower, always good to talk to you. Thanks for your reporting.
And to you too. Yeah.